So after spending more than a few hours looking at these frames, I have come to the conclusion that the map is slightly different than the first iteration I presented. Now I want to preface this by saying this is all speculation and theory. This is absolutely not fact. Until we see the reveal trailer, then and only then we can come to a concrete solution. And the next thing I want to say is that this is definitely not a reskin, but rather a map that may be inspired by the blueprint of Soul, with the interior of each infrastructure in the map being inspired by multiple maps associated with their respected sponsor. Now at first I thought this was a condensed Soul, but something was bugging me after I posted the last video. Why was the generator not connected to what resembled the small hospital, but rather connected to construction? And why in the picture that is facing the small hospital is the player standing on infrastructure with the color scheme of iSoul? If we are strictly following the blueprint of Soul, then this area should be in Gimo's green color palette, and the player should not have a wall next to him, but rather an open spaced patio. But it is not. However, what we do know is that yet again we see construction in the background. That is assuming, of course, that construction is a square structure. On a side note, I know this is construction because if we look at the picture in the alley, the railing of the roof as well as the square opening are the same. So standing from where the data center is, aka in Gimo's sponsored area, we know that construction is right in front of us because it is visible in this frame, as well as in Gimo, aka where the generators are supposed to be, are in the background of this alley frame. It clearly matches the color palette as well as the infrastructure of the generators. Also, in both pictures, there is no structure that is visible adjacent to the generators. With this evidence, we can confidently place the data center on one side of the construction, thus taking up one side of the square. Now let's move on to the left side of construction, which now will refer back to the alley picture, showing us that the structure which would represent the apartments would take up this side of the square. And again, we can see Ngima's area visible from this point of view, giving us more evidence that led us to this result. Now with two sides left, we can somewhat pinpoint the remaining sponsored areas, which would be iSoul. Now we are going to go back to this frame and place this unknown structure that has the color palette of iSoul occupying one side of construction, and fill the remaining side with the structure representing the small hospital. Then finally, place the structure representing the big hospital behind that. Now knowing this, we can confidently associate each structure and color palette to their respective sponsor, as well as locate every area presented in this teaser, starting with this first frame, which we now know is the inside of construction looking at the apartments, sharing the same color palette from the sponsor Halto. The next area is represented by iSoul. Due to how long the hallways are, as well as the smooth edges that the walls have, gives it a very low chance that this location is either part of the structure representing the small and large hospital. I will further elaborate this later in the video. But the only other location this could be is the structure representing the mall. And in this next area, we have a layout that clearly matches the layout of the small hospital in Seoul, with an entrance to the left, an entrance to the right, and standing 3 stories high. Now we have an area sponsored by Ngimo, which is a redesign of what the underground data center would be. We can tell this from 3 factors. The first being the building that stands at the right, with the zip line placed in a similar position that was in Seoul, as well as the extension to the roof of the building on the right. This is even further elaborated on the frame showing off the entire area. We can see in the left corner a roof shape that resembles the shape of this glass roof. Now we move on to the next frame, which we already established as the alley, in between the structures representing construction and apartments. This next frame was tricky because at first I thought it was the area behind the structure representing the apartments. However, this cannot be true because the squares that are on top of the Halto wall have only been seen on construction, as well as the tall building representing the mall structure being adjacent to it. You guys are probably wondering why I came to this conclusion that the tall building is the mall structure, and I'm going to bring you back again to this frame, where we are facing the small hospital. And to the right of us is a structure that's walls continue upwards all the way past the field of view. Also, from what we can tell from the alley frame, is that the structure representing construction is 4 stories tall. Now that we know the openness of construction, this frame here has a high chance of being the interior of the structure representing the apartments. Now this next one was also pretty tough because at first I thought it was the roof of the apartments. However, this cannot be true because if I go back to what we theorized was the interior of the apartments, you can clearly see that there is sunlight shining through to the ground floor, meaning that there is not a smooth surface on the roof of the apartments. However, this area is part of construction, with the wall also standing 4 stories tall and has the same orange orange aluminum wall that the previous frame did. Therefore, I conclude that this is to the left of where the player was facing in the previous construction frame. Now, moving on to the next, we have a location that at first I thought was the small hospital. However, this cannot be true either because of the walkway not being connected to the back wall. Instead, it extends to the other side isolated, with a picture of our sponsor to the left, and the number 6 adjacent to it, which could also be found on this frame here. And if you observe the right hand corner, you'll see a support beam and fencing that stretches around part of the building, just as you do in the corner of this frame. Moving on to the next, which is located inside the mall structure sponsored by iSoul. At first, I thought this frame was located in the big hospital. However, I stand corrected, because from what I can tell, the mall is the only structure that apparently has these smooth-edged platforms that separate each floor, which is elaborated more here with the long hallways and very tall ceilings, as well as the smooth-edged platforms stacking on top of each other just as they would in the original mall in Seoul. From the outside perspective of the small and big hospital structure, they both do not have the height and width of this interior, giving further evidence that the only other location it could be is the structure representing the mall. Now, this frame right here is especially important because it gives us further evidence that the mall structure is connected to what we know as the small hospital. Or should I say, the small hospital garden, because you can see the jump pad connecting both locations as well as the big hospital in the background, with a massive hologram shoe in the sky that was pointed out by Discord user Spookaby. Sorry if I butchered your name, man. This shoe can also be located on the frame looking out to the small hospital. Due to the polished floor with the white stripe running down the middle and the 2 present columns on each side, along with the banners, I would even go as far as saying that this is what it would look like if you were to turn around in the previous frame. Next, we get a good look at the right side of the structure representing the big hospital. As you can see, it is identical to the right side of this frame. Now we are making our way back into the mall structure, and this is the jump pad that we saw in the previous frame, with the long hallway and the columns. And in this frame, it is supposed to be what we see when we use the jump pad in the mall looking up. The next frame is of the player that had just used the jump pad, landing on one of the floors in the mall. The evidence we have of this is from the previous frame of the player looking up having the same banners as the ones we see in front of us. And in this next one, it is the light trailing behind him, with the medium in the previous frame located right here. And that's every frame I didn't cover in my previous video. In conclusion, I still stand by what I said in my last video. This map is heavily inspired by the blueprint of Seoul. However, to make it extraordinarily clear, it is not a reskin, as you can see from what I just presented you. Essentially, the apartments and mall have swapped places. And from the looks of things, this map is similar to Seoul, however, excels in where it falls short. Everything from what I can tell is within arm's reach because of the abundance of jump pads and zip lines, allowing you and your squad to get back into the action as soon as possible, which will create the fast-paced, chaotic gameplay that made us fall in love with the finals in the first place. I believe this is what they meant when they said they are going back to their original intentions. And I am going to go out on a limb here and also say I think this map has the potential to be the best in the game. Anyhow, that's about all I have for you guys. Again, I want to state that this is all speculation and nothing is set in stone until we see that reveal trailer. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you found this video informative, please smash that like button. It's a small button for you, but makes a massive difference for this channel. Also, subscribe for all things to finals. Peace and love, guys, and I'll see you next time.